When I was a kid growing up in a small, worn-out house on the edge of Atlanta, my grandmother was my entire world. She was the glue that held our family together, the woman who worked 3 jobs just to make sure my brother and I never went hungry. I can still remember the smell of her cornbread baking in the oven every Sunday, and the way she'd hum old gospel songs while sweeping the porch. She used to tell me, "Baby, one day I'm gonna live in a house where the sun never stops shining." I never forgot that. I promised myself that if I ever made it big, I'd give her that dream. And years later I finally did. After years of building my business, saving every penny, and climbing my way out of debt, I bought her a retirement home worth $3 million. It wasn't just a house, it was everything she ever deserved. The place was stunning. Glass walls that looked out over a peaceful lake, a private garden full of roses, and a front porch where she could sit and watch the sunset. When I handed her the keys, she cried harder than I'd ever seen her cry. I told her, "Grandma, you never have to worry again." And for a while, everything felt perfect. But as with most stories in my family, peace doesn't last long. My older brother Marcus had always been distant, a little jealous even. He was the kind of person who wanted success but didn't want to work for it. He'd made a few bad business decisions, lost a lot of money, and was always looking for a way to fix things fast. When he showed up with his wife, Tasha, at Grandma's new house, I thought they just wanted to celebrate. But looking back, I realized that was the beginning of something I never saw coming. Tasha was sharp. The kind of woman who smiled sweetly while calculating her next move. She'd always had this way of making you feel small without ever raising her voice. She complimented everything about the house, saying how lucky Grandma was to have such a beautiful place. But her eyes were on the walls, the floors, the furniture. I could tell she wasn't admiring it. She was measuring it. At first, I didn't think much of it. Family can be complicated, but I trusted them. After all, this house wasn't about money, it was about love. Grandma finally had the comfort she'd earned, and that's all that mattered to me. 4 months, I visited every weekend, bringing groceries, fixing things around the house, and sitting with her on the porch while she told me stories about her childhood. Marcus and Tasha started visiting too, but I noticed they came around more when I wasn't there. One day Grandma called me sounding worried. Her voice was shaky, like she didn't want to say what was on her mind. She said Marcus had been talking to her about updating paperwork for the house. Something about making it easier for the family to handle things if anything ever happened to her. I immediately felt uneasy. I told her not to sign anything, not without me or a lawyer looking at it first. She promised she wouldn't. But deep down I could tell she was torn. Marcus was her first grandchild, her pride and joy, and she never wanted to believe he'd do anything wrong. Weeks went by. I got busy with work, traveling between cities, and I didn't check in as often as I should have. When I finally visited again, something felt different. Grandma was quieter. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I asked if everything was okay, and she just said she was tired. I brushed it off, thinking maybe she wasn't feeling well. That evening, I left early, not realizing it would be the last time I'd see her sitting on that porch. A few weeks later, she passed away peacefully in her sleep. Losing her felt like losing a part of myself. I couldn't breathe at her funeral. But I kept reminding myself she was at peace now, resting where she always wanted to be, her dream home by the lake. After the service, the family gathered to discuss her estate. That's when everything came crashing down. The lawyer opened a folder and began reading. He said the house, the $3 million home I'd bought, was no longer under my grandmother's name. It had been transferred weeks before her death. The deed now belonged to Marcus and his wife, Tasha. I remember my hands going numb. I thought it was a mistake, maybe a clerical error. But the lawyer showed the signed documents, notarized and recorded. My name wasn't on anything. I couldn't understand it. I paid for that house in full. Every brick, every tile, every inch of it had my sweat behind it. I asked how it was even possible. The lawyer said a new deed had been filed. Apparently, Grandma had signed it over voluntarily. My mind went blank. Grandma would never do that. Not knowingly. Not unless someone had pressured her. I turned to Marcus, demanding an explanation, but he wouldn't even meet my eyes. Tasha just sat there, calm and collected, her hands folded in her lap. "She wanted us to take care of it," she said softly. "She didn't want you to carry all that burden." That's when I realized, the house wasn't just stolen. My grandmother's trust had been stolen too. The weeks that followed were a blur. I hired lawyers, filed reports, tried everything I could to fight back. But every time I thought I was getting somewhere, another door closed. Somehow, every piece of paperwork looked clean, every signature matched. The house was legally theirs. I was left staring at a home I built out of love, now owned by the two people who destroyed that love. And yet, something about the documents didn't sit right with me. There was a date, a small inconsistency, something hidden in plain sight that no one else noticed. It hinted that maybe, just maybe, Grandma hadn't signed everything willingly. I started digging, calling people, visiting the notary who supposedly witnessed the signature. And that's when the first crack in their story appeared. The notary didn't even remember meeting my grandmother. That was the moment I knew this wasn't over. I didn't care how much money it cost, how long it took, or how many lies I had to uncover. I was going to find the truth. Because that house wasn't just property, it was her legacy. And I wasn't about to let anyone take that away from her. But what I discovered next didn't just change how I saw Marcus and Tasha. It changed how I saw my entire family. It made me question who had been on my side all along, and who had been quietly waiting for their chance to betray me. The real story began the moment I found that one missing piece of evidence. And trust me, what it revealed was something none of us were prepared for. To be continued. The night after I found that inconsistency in the documents, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying every moment leading up to Grandma's passing. Every conversation, every visit from Marcus and Tasha, every time Grandma looked uneasy but said nothing. The house felt too quiet now, like it was holding secrets in its walls. I sat in my car parked outside, staring at the glowing windows that used to feel warm and alive but now looked cold and distant. That house wasn't just property to me. It was a promise I made to the woman who raised me. And someone had twisted that promise into something ugly. I decided to start from the beginning. I needed to understand how things had gone so wrong so fast. The first thing I did was pull together every record related to the purchase. The bank transfer, the title documents, the insurance. My name was all over the financial side, but the ownership? That was another story. Somehow, the deed had been rewritten, recorded, and sealed, all while I was completely unaware. And the worst part? Everything looked legal on paper. The signatures, the dates, the witnesses, everything. But I knew my grandmother's handwriting. I'd seen her sign birthday cards, checks, and even the deed when we first bought the place. The signature on that new deed looked almost perfect, but not quite. There was something off about the curve of her L. I reached out to a handwriting expert I found through a friend, just to get a second opinion. I didn't tell them anything about the situation, just asked them to compare two sets of signatures. When the expert called me back, their tone said it all. They look similar, they said, but the newer one, there are signs it might have been traced. My chest tightened. Traced. That meant someone had forged my grandmother's signature. And the only people who had access to her documents were Marcus and Tasha. I remember calling Marcus that night. He answered on the third ring, his voice tense like he already knew why I was calling. Why'd you do it? I asked him, my voice shaking. You think I don't know? You think I can't tell that signature's fake? There was a long pause. Then he said quietly, you don't understand what she wanted. And before I could say another word, he hung up. That sentence stuck with me for days. You don't understand what she wanted. What did he mean by that? Grandma had always been clear about her wishes. She used to tell me, that house is yours one day, baby. But for now it's mine to enjoy. She never mentioned giving it to Marcus, never hinted at anything like that. But the way he said it made me wonder if there was more to the story, something I hadn't seen. I decided to visit her lawyer, the same one who had handled her small estate and health documents for years. Mr. Lawson was an older man who had known my grandmother for decades. When I told him what had happened, his expression turned serious. He pulled out his files, flipping through folders until he found one labeled, Patricia Hill. He said, she came in about 6 months before she passed, just to update her medical papers and a small trust. But I never handled anything about a deed transfer. If something was changed, it wasn't done through me. That confirmed my worst fear. Whoever had done it went behind the lawyer's back. Mr. Lawson agreed to check if any new paperwork had been filed elsewhere. A few days later he called me, sounding disturbed. The new deed was filed at a private notary's office. Not one we usually work with. I asked for the address. When I got there, it was a small, quiet office in a strip mall, almost hidden behind a laundromat. The notary, a middle-aged woman named Linda, looked confused when I mentioned my grandmother's name. She flipped through her records and frowned. I remember your brother and his wife, she said. They came in with an elderly lady. She looked tired. They said she just needed to sign over some property to simplify her finances. My stomach dropped. I asked her if she was sure it was my grandmother. She hesitated, then said, to be honest, I thought she seemed confused that day. But she signed, so I notarized. That was all I needed to hear. Grandma hadn't known what she was signing. I left the office with my heart pounding. It wasn't just a matter of greed anymore. It was manipulation. My grandmother had trusted the wrong people, and they'd used her trust to take everything. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, staring at the steering wheel, trying to decide what to do next. Part of me wanted to confront Marcus right then, to tell him I knew everything. But something told me to wait, to get proof before making a move. Over the next few weeks, I started piecing together the puzzle. I went through old text messages, call logs, and bank statements. That's when I noticed small, odd withdrawals from Grandma's account, always just under $10,000, spaced out every few weeks. It added up to almost $60,000 before she died. I showed the records to the bank manager, and she confirmed that Marcus had been added as a co-signer a few months before her death. I couldn't believe it. He'd been controlling her money too. Every discovery made me angrier, but it also made me sad. I kept wondering what Grandma must have felt, if she realized what was happening, or if she trusted them so completely that she never questioned it. Either way, I had to make things right. But as I kept digging, things started to get strange. One night, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, no one spoke for a few seconds. Then a man's voice said, "You should stop looking into this. It's not going to change anything." I froze. Before I could ask who it was, the call ended. I tried calling back, but the number was disconnected. That's when I realized I wasn't just dealing with family drama anymore. Someone didn't want the truth to come out. I started keeping notes of everything, every date, every conversation, every piece of evidence. I even set up a camera in front of Grandma's house, just in case. A few nights later, the footage showed a car pulling up and parking across the street. It just sat there, engine running, for nearly 20 minutes. Then it drove off. I couldn't make out the license plate, but it felt too coincidental. I knew Marcus had money troubles, but the deeper I looked, the worse it got. He'd borrowed heavily from people he shouldn't have. There were business debts, unpaid loans, and even rumors of threats. It hit me then, this wasn't just about jealousy or inheritance. He and Tasha had done all this to save themselves. And the house. That was their ticket out. Still, one question haunted me: what exactly did Grandma sign that day? Was she tricked into thinking it was something else? Or did someone forge her signature after she was gone? I had to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I went back to the notary's office one last time, asking to see the original files. Linda looked nervous but handed them over. When I held the papers in my hands, I noticed something strange on the last page. A faint indentation, like another paper had been pressed over it when someone signed. I ran my fingers over it and saw the faint outline of a different name underneath. My heart started racing. It wasn't Grandma's name at all, it was Tasha's. Family betrayal anymore. It was about uncovering a secret that someone was desperate to keep buried. And I wasn't sure who I could trust anymore. That one mark changed everything. It meant there was another document involved, one they hadn't shown anyone. Something hidden that could explain how the deed was switched so cleanly. But before I could take those papers to my lawyer, something happened that made everything 10 times more complicated. My car was broken into, and all my files, every copy of the documents, were gone. The only thing left was a note on the dashboard that said, "Let it go." That night, as I sat in the dark staring at the empty passenger seat, I realized this wasn't just about. The morning after my car was broken into, I sat on my grandmother's old porch steps, staring out at the lake. The air was cool, the sky painted with soft gray clouds, and for a moment, everything looked calm, almost peaceful. But inside I was anything but calm. Someone had stolen my evidence, the only proof I had that the deed had been changed illegally. And the note they left, "Let it go," felt more like a threat than advice. Whoever was behind this didn't just want the house. They wanted me to stop digging. But I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Grandma smile, heard her laugh, and remembered why I'd bought this place in the first place. I owed it to her to find the truth. I started over. I went back to the few people I trusted. My cousin Denise, who'd always been close to Grandma, and my old friend Jordan, who worked in real estate. Denise remembered that a few weeks before Grandma passed, she'd mentioned feeling pressured. She told Denise that Marcus and Tasha kept bringing papers for her to sign, saying they were about health care and taxes. Denise hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now it all made sense. Grandma must have been tricked into signing something without realizing it was the house deed. Jordan helped me dig into property records and public filings. He said something interesting. The day the deed was transferred, another property under Marcus's name had been foreclosed on. It seemed too convenient, like he'd been desperate for a lifeline, and the house had become that lifeline. That made the betrayal sting even more. He hadn't just stolen from me, He'd used Grandma's kindness to fix his own mistakes. But there was something else bothering me. The break-in felt too organized. Marcus wasn't that smart. If he was behind it, someone had to be helping him. Tasha maybe. Or someone she knew. She'd always been good with paperwork, contracts, business deals. If anyone could make a forged signature look real, it was her. I started watching them quietly. I didn't tell them I was investigating again. Instead, I pretended to back off. I even texted Marcus saying I wanted to move on for the sake of family. His reply was short, "That's for the best." But I could tell he didn't believe me. A week later, I parked near the house one evening, keeping a low profile. Their car was in the driveway, lights glowing in the living room. Through the window I saw them arguing. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but the way Tasha pointed at him, the way Marcus slammed his hand against the wall, it looked bad. Something was cracking between them. Whatever secret they were hiding, it was eating them from the inside. I kept digging quietly. One of Grandma's neighbors, an older man named Mr. Peterson, told me he'd seen something strange around the time the deed was changed. He remembered a black SUV pulling up a few times when Marcus and Tasha were there. He said a man in a suit would come inside, stay for a few minutes, and then leave. That didn't sound like a family visit. It sounded like business. Jordan helped me trace property transfers that involved that same notary office. Turns out, a handful of suspicious transactions had gone through there, properties that suddenly changed hands right before foreclosure or bankruptcy. It looked like part of a bigger pattern. Maybe Marcus and Tasha had gotten mixed up in something much bigger than I realized. While all this was happening, another strange thing occurred. I got a letter in the mail with no return address. Inside was a single page that read, "You're looking in the wrong place. Ask about the trust." That was it. No signature, no clue who sent it. But it changed everything. I remembered Mr. Lawson, Grandma's lawyer, mentioning a small trust sheet updated months before she died. I hadn't paid much attention to it at the time. Now it felt like the missing piece. When I went back to see Mr. Lawson, he looked uneasy. "I was going to call you," he said. "Something about your grandmother's trust isn't adding up." A few days before she passed, a new amendment was filed. It names Tasha as a temporary trustee. That shouldn't have happened without your knowledge. My stomach turned. Tasha had managed to get control not just of the house but of the trust too. That meant she could have moved money, assets, anything without anyone questioning it. Mr. Lawson said he was going to dig further. But a few days later, I got a call from his assistant saying he'd fallen ill and was taking time off. That same night, I got another anonymous text. "You're getting too close." My hands trembled as I read it. Someone was watching me. Despite the fear, I couldn't stop. I started piecing together Tasha's side of the story. Before marrying Marcus, she'd worked at a title company. She knew exactly how property transfers worked. She also had a quiet history of debt and unpaid loans that she'd kept hidden from the family. It hit me then, she wasn't just helping Marcus. She was the one who planned everything. Meanwhile, Marcus began avoiding me completely. Calls went to voicemail. Messages left on read. But I noticed something strange one afternoon while checking the public court records again. Marcus had filed for divorce. That explained their arguments. Maybe guilt had finally gotten to him. Or maybe things between them had gone too far. That's when another subplot started unfolding, one I didn't expect. Denise told me that Marcus had been visiting Grandma's old church pastor recently, asking for advice and forgiveness. The pastor said Marcus looked broken, like a man trapped in something he couldn't escape. When I heard that, part of me felt a flicker of sympathy. Maybe he hadn't planned all this from the start. Maybe Tasha had pulled him in deeper than he realized. Still, the damage was done. The trust, the deed, the house, it was all tangled up in lies. I couldn't undo what they did, but I could still uncover how. The next step was finding proof that the notary records were manipulated. That meant tracking down anyone who'd been working there around that time. When I returned to the office, Linda, the notary, was gone. A for-lease sign hung in the window. I asked around and learned that she'd closed the office 2 weeks ago and moved out of town suddenly. No forwarding address. No trace. It felt like the walls were closing in again. Every time I got close to the truth, it slipped away. Still, I wasn't giving up. I kept every scrap of information I could find, the anonymous letter, the text messages, even the broken car window photos. Something told me all these pieces would connect soon. I just had to keep pushing. But one night, as I was going through old voice messages on my phone, I found one I hadn't noticed before. It was from Grandma. The date was just a few days before she passed. Her voice was soft but nervous. She said, "Baby, if anything ever happens and people start asking questions about this house, Don't trust everyone who says they're helping. Some people have other reasons. But the truth, it's somewhere in those papers. Her words hit me like a storm. She knew. Somehow, she'd realized something wasn't right before it was too late. And maybe she left that message as a warning, because she knew I'd come looking for answers one day. But I wasn't ready to stop paying yet. The more I listened to that message, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about property or money anymore. This was about loyalty, family, and betrayal that ran deeper than I ever imagined. And as I sat there in the dark, listening to her voice over and over again, I made a silent promise. I was going to uncover every lie, every secret, and every person involved. Even if it meant tearing apart what was left of my family. Because sometimes the truth costs everything. The more I dug into the mystery, the more dangerous everything started to feel. The quiet, peaceful rhythm of my life was gone. Every night, I found myself checking over my shoulder, locking the doors twice, making sure no one was following me. I had this growing feeling that someone was watching, not just from a distance but close. Too close. The house that once symbolized love and comfort now felt like the center of a storm that refused to die down. One night, while I was reviewing the last copy of the notary's paperwork I'd scanned on my computer, I noticed something strange buried deep in the file data. A digital stamp showing it had been edited after the date it was supposedly signed. That meant the document had been tampered with electronically before being printed and filed. It wasn't just fraud, it was calculated. And whoever had done it knew exactly how to cover their tracks. I printed the screenshot, slipped it into a folder, and decided it was time to confront Tasha face to face. When I called her, she didn't answer. So I drove to the house, my grandmother's house. The lights were off, the place quiet, but I could see a faint glow from one of the upstairs windows. I stood at the front door, debating whether to knock or just walk away. But before I could decide, the door creaked open. Tasha stood there, her expression unreadable, eyes tired but sharp. "I know what you did," I said quietly, holding up the folder. "And I can prove it." She didn't flinch. Instead, she let out a small, humorless laugh. "You really think you understand what's going on, don't you?" she said, her tone calm, almost pitying. "You're so busy trying to play hero that you can't see the bigger picture." "What bigger picture?" I snapped. "You forged her signature, took her house, and—" She interrupted, voice low. "You think this was about money? About a house?" She stepped closer, her eyes locking on mine. "You have no idea what your brother's gotten into. He dragged me into it, and your grandmother got caught in the middle." Her words hit me like ice. I could see something behind her eyes. Fear. Genuine fear. She wasn't just hiding guilt, she was hiding from something. Before I could ask more, Marcus appeared in the hallway behind her. His face was pale, his eyes sunken. He looked nothing like the confident brother I once knew. "You need to leave," he said quietly. "Now." I refused. "Not until you tell me what's really going on." Marcus rubbed his face, shaking his head. "You wouldn't understand. It's bigger than us now." "Try me," I said. He looked at Tasha, then back at me. "You remember the people who helped us fix Grandma's paperwork? They weren't doing it for free. They're expecting something back, and if they don't get it, none of us are safe." My stomach dropped. So it wasn't just a family betrayal. They'd involved other people, people dangerous enough that my brother was terrified. I didn't know whether to believe him or not. But the fear in his voice was real. "Who are they?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead he whispered, "They know you've been digging. You shouldn't have gotten involved." Before I could respond, Tasha's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her face draining of color. Without a word, she shut the door halfway and whispered something to Marcus. He nodded, then turned back to me. "You need to go," he said again, more urgent this time. I left, but my mind was racing. If what Marcus said was true, this wasn't just about family greed. It was about something much darker. And now I was in it too. That night, as I drove home, headlights appeared in my rearview mirror, bright, close, following every turn I took. My pulse quickened. I sped up, took random turns, even pulled into a gas station parking lot. The car behind me slowed, then drove past. My hands were shaking. I told myself it was probably nothing, just my imagination. But deep down I knew better. Over the next few days, everything escalated. I got another anonymous text. "Stop or you'll regret it." My tires were slashed one morning. Then a few nights later, my apartment door was left slightly open, though I was sure I'd locked it. Nothing was stolen, but someone had been there. It was a clear message. Still, I couldn't walk away. I met with Jordan again and showed him the digital stamp I'd found on the document. His face went pale. "This isn't just a bad signature," he said. "This looks like a coordinated fraud ring. People who do this professionally. If your brother got tied up with them, they won't just stop because you found out." The thought made my skin crawl. But if these people were using my grandmother's deed for more than just a house, maybe laundering money, hiding assets, or flipping titles, then stopping them wasn't just about me anymore. It was about justice for her and for others who might have been hurt too. A few days later, I got a call from someone unexpected. Linda, the notary who'd vanished. Her voice was shaky but urgent. "I shouldn't be calling you," she said, "but I can't keep this on my conscience anymore. Your grandmother didn't know what she was signing. I was told to push it through by someone who said they represented her lawyer. But it wasn't him. It was a woman named Tasha. And after that day I started getting threats. That's why I left." I recorded every word she said. My heart was pounding as I realized I finally had the proof I needed. But before she could say more, the call cut off. The next morning I tried to call her back. No answer. Her phone was disconnected again. It felt like everyone who tried to help either disappeared or went silent. I decided to take what I had to the authorities. But before I could, Marcus called me out of nowhere. His voice was strained, almost desperate. "Meet me at the house," he said. "I need to tell you everything. Tonight." I didn't know if it was a trap or a real confession, but I couldn't ignore it. That house had started everything. It was only right that it would end there. As I drove there that night, the streets felt eerily empty. The wind howled against the car, and the lake beside the property shimmered under the moonlight like it was hiding something too. When I pulled up, the lights inside were flickering. The front door was slightly ajar. I stepped inside cautiously, calling Marcus's name. No answer. The air felt heavy, tense. Then from upstairs I heard a loud crash, like something had fallen. I rushed up the staircase, heart pounding, every step echoing through the silent halls. At the top, I saw Marcus in the hallway holding a folder. His hands were shaking, his face pale as a ghost. He looked up at me and whispered, "You were right. About everything." Before I could respond, there was movement behind him, fast, sharp. A shadow passed across the hall. Marcus's eyes widened in terror. Then came the sound of footsteps running down the stairs. I chased after the figure, but by the time I reached the front door, it was too late. Whoever it was had disappeared into the night. When I turned back, Marcus was gone too. The folder he'd been holding lay on the floor, papers scattered across the wooden hallway. I bent down to pick them up, and my hands froze when I saw what was inside: bank statements, contracts, and names of people I'd never heard of. All connected to multiple property transfers, all leading back to the same notary office. It wasn't just about Grandma's house anymore. It was a full-scale real estate scam, and my family had been the perfect cover. As I stood there, the wind howling through the open door, I realized the truth I was chasing was even more dangerous than I'd imagined. And now that I was this deep, there was no turning back. Somewhere out there, someone was watching, waiting to make sure I didn't take the next step. But I was already standing at the edge of it all, right before everything would come crashing down. As I stood there, the wind whistling through the half-open door, I could feel my heart pounding in my ears. The folder in my hands felt heavier than it should have, like it carried the weight of every secret my family had tried to bury. Papers fluttered across the hallway, covered in numbers, dates, and names I didn't recognize. But one name, written in bold ink at the top of a form, froze me completely: Patricia Hill Living Trust. My grandmother's name. Somehow, her trust had been used in more ways than I ever imagined. It wasn't just her house they'd taken. Her identity had been used too. I felt dizzy. Whoever forged her deed didn't just steal her home. They built something bigger out of her name. A network of property transfers, fake accounts, and fraudulent deals, all branching out from that one signature. It was a house of cards, and if I pulled the wrong one, the entire thing could come crashing down. I started gathering the papers, trying to make sense of them. But as I flipped through one page, I noticed something strange. A check stub with my grandmother's name and signature, dated 2 weeks after she passed away. My blood ran cold. That meant someone had kept using her name even after she was gone. Someone close enough to access her accounts. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just Marcus and Tasha anymore. There was someone else involved. Someone behind the scenes. The name on the bottom of that check read L. Peterson. At first it didn't click. But then I remembered Grandma's neighbor, Mr. Peterson, the kind old man who'd told me about the strange SUV visits. He'd been right next door through everything. I didn't want to believe it, but the more I looked, the more things lined up. Mr. Peterson's signature appeared on multiple notary forms. He wasn't just a neighbor, he was the witness on several forged documents. I grabbed my phone and called Jordan. "You won't believe this," I said. "It's not just my brother and his wife. Peterson's in on it too. He's been working with them from the start." Jordan sounded alarmed. "You need to be careful. If he's involved, he's probably been keeping tabs on you this whole time." My stomach twisted. I turned toward the window and froze. Across the lake in the faint moonlight, I saw a silhouette standing near Peterson's porch. He wasn't moving, just watching. It felt like his eyes were locked on me. I quickly grabbed the folder and backed away from the window. My hands were shaking, but I knew what I had to do. I called Marcus even though I wasn't sure he'd answer. This time he did. His voice was hoarse, panicked. "I didn't want it to go this far," he said before I could speak. "I thought it was just business. Peterson said he could fix everything, clear our debts. I didn't know he was using Grandma's trust. I swear I didn't know." I could hear movement in the background, like he was pacing or packing something. "Marcus, where are you?" I asked. There was silence, then a whisper. "He's watching me too." The line went dead. That was when everything clicked into place. Peterson wasn't some innocent old man caught up in a bad situation. He was the mastermind. He'd used my family's mistakes to build his operation, controlling everything from behind the scenes. Marcus and Tasha had just been pawns in his game. I grabbed my keys, determined to confront him. But before I could even reach the door, a car engine started outside. The same black SUV Mr. Peterson had been seen with months ago was parked near the driveway, headlights cutting through the fog. My phone buzzed, a new text from an unknown number: "Walk away. Last warning." I stood frozen, staring at the glowing screen, torn between fear and fury. Everything in me screamed to run, but I couldn't. This was Grandma's legacy, and I wasn't about to let it disappear into lies and paperwork. I backed away from the window and called Jordan again. "If anything happens to me, the evidence is in my cloud drive," I said quickly. "There's a folder called Her House. Everything's there, the documents, the recordings, the photos." Jordan's voice shook. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to finish what she started," I said. As I hung up, I noticed something that made my pulse race even faster. One of the scattered papers near the door wasn't just another transaction form, it was a letter. My grandmother's handwriting. It was faint and shaky, but it was hers. The letter was addressed to me. The date written at the top was 2 days before she died. I sat down, my hands trembling, and began to read. She wrote about how she'd started to suspect someone was using her name. How she didn't understand all the papers Marcus and Tasha brought her, but she felt something wasn't right. The last line made my throat tighten. "If anything happens, look in the attic." The truth is there. The attic. I had spent countless days in that house and never once looked up there. I grabbed a flashlight and climbed the narrow stairs. The air was dusty, heavy with the smell of old wood. My beam swept across boxes of clothes, old photographs, and holiday decorations, until it landed on a small, locked chest. I pried it open with a screwdriver. Inside were documents, a few envelopes, and a single USB drive taped to the lid. On it was a note that said, "For my grandson." I plugged the drive into my laptop right there on the attic floor. It contained scanned letters, legal notes, and, most shocking of all, a voice recording. I pressed play. It was Grandma's voice. "If you're hearing this," she said softly, "then you found what I was too scared to tell anyone. They came to me saying they were helping the family. I didn't want to believe my own blood could be part of it. But something tells me this wasn't just about me. Be careful, baby. There's more than one of them." My chest tightened. More than one of them. That meant Peterson wasn't the only one behind this. Someone else had been pulling the strings too. Someone closer than I realized. Just then I heard footsteps creak from below. Slow, deliberate. The sound echoed up through the floorboards. My flashlight flickered. I held my breath, staring toward the attic stairs. The footsteps stopped. Then came a voice, low and familiar. "You shouldn't have come back here." It was Marcus. But something in his tone wasn't right. It was cold, steady, like he wasn't himself anymore. "Marcus." I called out, trying to keep my voice calm. "What's going on?" He didn't answer right away. Then, after a long silence, he said, "You were never supposed to find that." I froze, the words sinking into the air like a warning. I didn't know what scared me more, the thought that Peterson was still out there, or the possibility that Marcus wasn't just a victim anymore. Because in that moment, I realized the truth might be darker than anything I'd imagined. And whatever came next, it was already too late to turn back. Marcus stood at the bottom of the attic stairs, his shadow stretching across the wooden floorboards. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us felt heavy, thick with everything that had gone unsaid for years. Resentment, guilt, fear. I could hear his slow, uneven breathing, like he was fighting with himself inside. My flashlight trembled slightly in my hand, the beam flickering over his face as he finally looked up. His eyes were tired, red, but there was something else in them too, regret. "You shouldn't have come back," he said again, but this time his voice cracked, the anger fading into exhaustion. "You don't understand what they made me do." I stepped closer to the stairs, careful not to make a sound. "Then help me understand," I said quietly. "Tell me everything." Marcus rubbed his face with both hands, pacing at the bottom of the steps. Peterson wasn't working alone. He had connections. People who flip estates of elderly homeowners, change paperwork, resell under new names. He promised to clear my debts if I helped him push Grandma to sign the trust transfer. I thought it was just paperwork to protect her assets. I didn't know he was planning to take everything. His words hit like a knife. "And Tasha?" I asked. He hesitated. "She found out. Instead of stopping him, she joined him. Said it was better to be part of it than lose everything." He looked up, eyes wet. I tried to stop her. But once Peterson got control, we couldn't back out. He had recordings, signatures, everything he needed to ruin us if we talked. I felt my throat tighten. "Then why are you here now?" "Because he's cleaning up," Marcus said, his voice trembling. "Peterson called me tonight. He said you were digging too deep and that he was going to finish it. He told me to meet him at the docks. Said I'd better convince you to stop before it's too late." The attic suddenly felt smaller, the air thinner. I grabbed the chest and the USB drive. "Then we go together," I said. "This ends tonight." Marcus nodded weakly, and for the first time in years, I saw a glimpse of my brother again, the real one. We drove in silence, the roads empty under the pale glow of the streetlights. The docks were quiet except for the gentle slap of water against the wooden posts. A single SUV was parked at the far end, its headlights cutting through the mist. Peterson stood near the edge, his hands clasped behind his back like he was waiting for us. He looked calm, too calm for a man caught in a web of fraud. "You two finally decided to show up," he said smoothly, his smile faint. "I was starting to think family loyalty was dead." "Why?" I asked, my voice firm despite the fear in my chest. "You had money, property, everything. Why drag my grandmother into this?" Peterson chuckled softly. "Because her name was clean. Her trust gave me access to lines of credit I couldn't touch otherwise. I didn't plan for her to pass so soon. But once she did, well, we adapted." Marcus stepped forward. "You used us. You made me ruin my own family." Peterson turned to him with a mocking grin. "I didn't make you. You made your choices, son. Greed just needed a little nudge." Marcus clenched his fists, tears burning in his eyes. I could see his shame eating him alive. "It's over," I said. "I have everything, proof, documents, her letter, the recording." I lifted the USB drive. "You're done." Peterson's smile didn't fade. "You think that's all it takes? You have no idea how deep this goes. That drive doesn't just expose me. It exposes everyone, including the bank, the lawyers, and your precious brother." Marcus's eyes widened in panic. "What are you talking about?" Peterson tilted his head. "You didn't tell him? The money you got from me came straight from the same trust you claimed you wanted to protect. You were living off her name long before she died." Marcus shook his head. "No, that's not true. You said it was a loan." Peterson stepped closer. "It was a loan from her estate. Which means, legally speaking, you're just as guilty as I am." Marcus looked at me, his face pale. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." For a second, everything blurred, the sound of the waves, the hum of the SUV's engine, the cold sting of the night air. It was like the truth had cracked open everything we believed about right and wrong. Peterson had played us all. But I wasn't backing down. "Maybe we're all guilty," I said, "but only one of us planned this." I stepped forward, hitting the record button on my phone. "And now I've got you on tape." Peterson's expression shifted instantly, his calm mask breaking. "You think anyone will believe you? You think you'll make it out of here with that evidence?" Before I could respond, Marcus moved, fast. He lunged forward, knocking Peterson off balance. The two struggled near the edge of the dock, the sound of splashing water echoing through the night. I ran to help, but by the time I reached them, Peterson had slipped, crashing into the cold, dark water below. The SUV lights flickered across the waves, but there was no sign of him coming up. Marcus stumbled back, breathing hard, his hands shaking. "I didn't mean to, I was just trying to stop him." I grabbed his arm. "We need to go. Now." We left the docks in silence, both of us shaking. The night felt endless, the guilt heavy on both our shoulders. I turned the USB drive over in my hand, wondering if it had all been worth it, if truth really mattered when it destroyed everything around it. The next morning, I handed everything over to the authorities. The documents, the recordings, Grandma's letter, every piece of proof I had. They promised an investigation, though part of me knew the deeper names Peterson mentioned might never see the light of day. Weeks passed. Marcus stayed distant, haunted by what had happened. The media called it an estate fraud tragedy, but none of them really understood what it cost. The house was eventually returned to Grandma's name, and though it felt hollow, I knew she'd finally get the peace she deserved. But one night as I was sorting through my emails, I noticed something strange. A new message, no sender, no subject line. I clicked it open. Inside was a short sentence. "You think it ends with Peterson? Look deeper." Attached was a document, an image of another deed transfer. Same style, same forged signatures. But this time it wasn't my grandmother's name. It was mine. For a long moment I just stared at the screen, my heart sinking. Somehow, even after everything, the web wasn't broken. It had just shifted. Someone had already moved on to their next target. And that's when I realized the real horror wasn't that my family had been used, it was that the system that allowed it was still alive, still watching, still working behind closed doors. The story wasn't over after all. 4 days after that message arrived, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my head. My grandmother's voice, Marcus's trembling confession, Peterson's final words before he vanished into the water. I thought I had put an end to it, that the truth had finally surfaced. But seeing that new deed with my own name on it shook me in a way I hadn't felt before. It meant someone was still out there, still working behind the scenes, still trying to control what wasn't theirs. I sat on the porch of the house I'd once bought for Grandma, staring at the lake as the sun rose. The water was calm now, nothing like that chaotic night at the docks. It was strange how peaceful it looked, considering everything that had happened. Marcus had stopped answering my calls. After the police took his statement, he disappeared into his own kind of exile, somewhere far enough that no one could find him. Maybe that was for the best. He needed to face himself before he could face anyone else. The authorities had declared Peterson dead after searching for days, though they never found a body. It was easier for them to close the file that way, call it an accident, move on. But I knew better. There were too many unanswered questions, too many loose threads. The email proved he wasn't the only one pulling strings. I spent weeks going through Grandma's old files, talking to people she'd known, tracing every name that had appeared in her papers. Some led nowhere, others to corporations that existed only on paper. It was like chasing shadows. But slowly something started to make sense. A pattern. Every trust Peterson and his partners had manipulated tied back to a single company, Hillview Estates. The irony didn't escape me. They'd even used her last name as a front. When I handed the information to the investigator handling the case, he looked at me with weary eyes. "You've done more than most people would," he said. "But this kind of fraud runs deep. It'll take time." I left the station that day feeling both empty and relieved. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The weight of what happened didn't disappear, but it became something else. A lesson, a responsibility. I couldn't change what had happened to Grandma, but I could make sure it didn't happen to anyone else. I started volunteering at a local senior rights group, helping families understand estate planning and how easily trust documents could be misused. Every time I spoke to an older couple or a worried son or daughter, I saw a bit of our story in theirs. The fear of losing what little security they had, the confusion of paperwork, the misplaced trust. It reminded me of why Grandma mattered so much. She wasn't just the heart of our family. She was a reminder that love doesn't fade even when people make terrible mistakes. Months later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name written in neat handwriting. Inside was a short note. "You did the right thing. Keep going." There was no signature, but I knew who it was from. Marcus. It was the first sign that he was still out there trying to make peace in his own way. I didn't know where he'd gone or if we'd ever speak again, but I hoped he'd find forgiveness, for himself more than anything. The house, the $3 million dream I'd bought for Grandma, now stood as both a symbol of love and loss. I couldn't bring myself to sell it. Instead, I turned it into something new, a retirement space for seniors with no family to care for them. I used what was left of my savings and community donations to make it happen. The walls that once echoed with pain slowly filled with laughter again. The smell of fresh flowers replaced the dust of old memories. I even hung Grandma's photo in the main hallway, right under the words she used to say all the time: "Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when it matters." Running the place wasn't easy. There were days I questioned if it was worth the emotional toll. But every time one of the residents smiled or shared a story that reminded me of her, I felt like I was doing exactly what she would have wanted. The past had taken enough. I wasn't letting it take any more. Then one afternoon, as I was closing up the office, my phone buzzed with another unknown message. This time there was no text, just a video file. My stomach turned as I pressed play. The grainy footage showed a pier, waves crashing in the background. For a moment I thought it was from that night at the docks. But then the camera shifted and I saw a figure standing near the edge. It was Peterson, alive, older, thinner, but unmistakably him. He looked straight into the camera and said, "You think you won, but you just opened a bigger door. Walk away while you still can." The video cut off there, the screen fading to black. For a long moment I just sat there in silence, my hands cold. It should have scared me, but it didn't. Instead I felt strangely calm. Because for the first time I understood something important. Evil doesn't disappear overnight, but neither does truth. I sent the video to the investigator immediately, along with everything I'd collected since. He promised to reopen the case and keep me updated. But I didn't wait for closure. I'd already found my own. Life moved forward as it always does. The residents filled the house with stories, birthdays, laughter. The lake outside, once a symbol of everything that went wrong, became a place of peace again. Sometimes I'd sit by the water at sunset and think about Grandma, her wisdom, her patience, her quiet strength. I'd whisper to the air, "We did it, Grandma." They didn't win. The scars were still there, of course. Trust wasn't something I gave easily anymore. But I learned that healing isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about turning pain into purpose. What started as a nightmare about a stolen deed ended up teaching me more about family, forgiveness, and resilience than anything else ever could. One evening, a new resident arrived at the home, a kind woman named Evelyn. As we sat in the common room filling out her forms, she smiled and said, "You remind me of my grandson. He bought me a house once just like this." Said it was his way of saying thank you. I smiled back, my heart tightening a little. "That's a beautiful thing to do," I said softly. She nodded. "It is. Love always finds a way to come home, doesn't it?" Her words stayed with me long after she went to her room. I realized then that maybe that's what this whole story was about. Love finding its way home even after being lost, broken, or stolen. That night, as I turned off the lights and walked through the quiet halls, I paused by Grandma's photo one last time. The smile in her eyes seemed brighter than ever, almost alive. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel haunted by what we'd lost. I felt guided by what we'd built. Because in the end, the story wasn't about a house worth $3 million, or the lies that tried to destroy us. It was about what can't be taken, love, truth, and the strength to begin again. And though the past will always whisper, I've learned how to listen without fear. Some stories don't end neatly, but this one ends where it began. With family, with hope, and with a promise that no one will ever steal our name again.